The morning sun cast long shadows across the ruins of Old Seoul. Dr. Jiho Kim wiped sweat from his forehead as he carefully brushed dirt away from another broken piece of concrete. He had been working at this dig site for 3 months now, searching through the remains of buildings destroyed in the Third World War over 200 years ago. "Dr. Kim, you should see this," called Minji Park from across the excavation site. She was the team's technology expert, always carrying strange devices that beeped and flashed with colored lights. Her voice carried excitement that made Jiho look up from his work. Jiho walked over to where Minji stood next to a large pile of twisted metal and broken stone. Behind her, Taiho Lee was setting up his analysis equipment. Taiho was young, but very good at figuring out what old things were made of and how old they were. "What did you find?" Jiho asked, looking down at the hole Minji had been digging. "The scanner picked up something strange about 10 feet down," Minji said, pointing her device toward the ground. "It's giving off some kind of energy reading. Very faint, but it's definitely there." Jiho felt his heart beat faster. After months of finding nothing but old bottles and pieces of building material, this could be something important. He grabbed his tools and carefully began digging where Minji pointed. The work was slow and careful. Every few minutes, Jiho would stop to brush away loose dirt and examine what he had uncovered. Taeho took pictures of everything, and Minji kept checking her scanner. "The signal is getting stronger," Minji said after an hour of digging. "Whatever it is, you're getting close." Jiho's brush hit something hard that was not stone or concrete. He worked more carefully now, brushing away dirt grain by grain. Slowly, a metallic surface appeared. It was smooth and seemed to glow with a soft inner light. "That's not possible," Taiho said, leaning closer. "Metal doesn't glow like that, not after being buried for centuries." As more of the object became visible, they could see it was a sword. The blade was long and straight, with strange writing carved along its length. The metal looked perfect, as if it had been made yesterday instead of being buried in the ruins of an ancient war. Jiho reached out to touch it, but Minji grabbed his arm. "Wait," she said. "Let me scan it first. The energy readings are off the charts now." She ran her scanner over the sword several times, frowning at the results. "This doesn't make sense. The energy signature is unlike anything I've ever seen. And the metal, Taiho, can you analyze this without touching it?" Taiho set up his portable analysis machine and aimed it at the sword. After a few minutes, he looked up with confusion on his face. "The metal contains elements that don't exist on Earth, at least not naturally. Some of these readings match theoretical elements that scientists think might exist in other star systems." "That's impossible," Jiho said. "This sword was buried before humans ever left Earth, before we even knew other planets existed with life on them." He looked more closely at the writing on the blade. Some of it looked like ancient Korean characters, but much older than anything he had seen before. Other symbols looked completely alien, like nothing from any Earth culture. "Can you read any of it?" Minji asked. Jiho studied the symbols carefully. Years of studying ancient languages helped him recognize some of the characters. Slowly, he began to make out words. "All enemies of the fallen warrior are now your enemies," he read aloud. The moment he spoke those words, something changed. The sword began to glow brighter, and a low humming sound filled the air. All 3 scientists stepped back in surprise. "The energy readings just doubled," Minji said, staring at her scanner. "Triple. This is incredible." Despite the warnings from his team, Jiho felt drawn to the sword. Something deep inside him said he needed to touch it, that it was meant for him. Before Minji or Taiho could stop him, he reached down and wrapped his fingers around the handle. The world exploded into light and sound. Suddenly, Jiho was no longer standing in the ruins of Seoul. He was floating in space, looking down at a planet that was not Earth. The planet was burning. Great ships filled the sky, some fighting against others. He could see explosions lighting up the darkness of space, like deadly fireworks. In the vision, he saw a human warrior standing on the surface of the burning planet. The warrior held the same sword that Jiho now held in his hands. Around the warrior stood creatures that were definitely not human, some with 4 arms, others that looked like giant insects, and others that seemed to be made of living crystal. But they were all fighting together against something else, something dark and terrible that seemed to eat light itself. The dark things moved like smoke, but hit like solid matter. Wherever they touched, everything died and turned to dust. The human warrior raised the sword high and shouted something that Jiho could not hear but somehow understood. It was a promise, a vow to fight until the end, to never surrender, to protect all life in the galaxy. Then the vision ended, and Jiho found himself back in the dig site. Minji and Taiho were shaking, their faces full of worry. Jiho, can you hear us? Minji was saying. You've been standing there for 5 minutes, not moving, not responding to anything we said. Jiho looked down at the sword in his hands. It was still glowing softly, but the humming had stopped. The metal felt warm against his skin, almost alive. We need to report this, he said quietly. This sword, it's not from Earth. And I don't think it's from our time period either. What do you mean? Taiho asked. Jiho looked up at the sky, remembering the vision of burning planets and space battles. I think this sword is much older than we thought, and I think the human race has a history that we never knew about. He carefully wrapped the sword in a cloth and placed it in a protective case. But even through the case, he could feel its warmth. And somewhere deep in his mind, he could hear an echo of that ancient warrior's vow. The sword had chosen him. But for what purpose, he was only beginning to understand. 3 months had passed since Jiho found the sword. Now he stood in a gleaming space station orbiting Earth, looking through a massive window at the blue planet below. The station was called Harmony 7, and it served as the headquarters for the Galactic Archaeology Division. Commander Nara Choi walked up beside him. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes who had spent many years working with alien species throughout the galaxy. Still thinking about home? She asked. Always, Jiho replied. But I'm also thinking about what we've learned about the sword. In the months since the discovery, teams of the galaxy's best scientists had studied the weapon. The results were disturbing and amazing at the same time. The sword was definitely not made by any known civilization. The metal was harder than diamond, but lighter than aluminum. Most strange of all, it seemed to respond to human thoughts and emotions. Commander Choi, Dr. Kim, please report to Laboratory 7 immediately, came a voice over the station's communication system. We have a situation. They hurried through the station's corridors, passing scientists and military officers from dozens of different species. Some looked almost human, while others were so alien that Jiho still found it hard to believe they existed. Laboratory 7 was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Yuna Song, the station's language expert, was bent over a computer terminal with excitement on her face. Beside her, Dawen Kang checked weapons and defense systems. Jisoo An sat connected to a strange machine that let her communicate with alien technology using her mind. What's happening? Commander Choi asked. The sword is active, Yuna said without looking up from her work. 20 minutes ago, it started sending out signals on frequencies we've never detected before. The signals are in multiple languages, including some that died out thousands of years ago. Dawen looked up from his weapons check. More importantly, something answered back. We're picking up response signals from across the galaxy. Whatever that sword is calling to, it's out there, and it's listening. Jiho felt a chill run down his spine. Where is the sword now? Containment Room 5, Jisoo said, her eyes still closed as she worked with the machine. But Dr. Kim, I need to warn you. The sword is asking for you specifically. I can feel its thoughts, I guess. It wants you to come to it. Commander Choi put a hand on Jiho's shoulder. You don't have to do this. We can study the sword without... You touching it again? But Jiho was already walking toward the containment room. He could feel the sword calling to him, just as Jisoo had said. It was like hearing someone call his name from far away. The containment room was a white, sterile chamber with thick walls designed to hold dangerous alien artifacts. The sword lay on a table in the center, glowing brighter than Jiho had ever seen it. As he approached, the glow became even stronger. "Hello, Guardian," said a voice in his mind. It was neither male nor female, but somehow felt ancient and wise. Jiho stopped walking. "Who are you?" "I am Hanil, the consciousness that dwells within this blade. I have waited 50,000 years for a worthy human to claim me." 50,000. Years? That's impossible! Humans weren't even civilized 50,000 years ago. You are wrong, young Guardian. Humans once ruled the stars. Your people were the greatest warriors the galaxy has ever known. But you sacrificed everything to save all life from the Void Devourers. Jiho's head was spinning. I don't understand. What are Void Devourers? Images flooded his mind, similar to the vision he had experienced when he first touched the sword, but much clearer now. He saw human fleets battling against creatures of pure darkness that consumed entire star systems. He saw human warriors standing side by side with aliens of every description, all united against a common enemy. The Void Devourers are entities of pure entropy, Hanul explained. They consume matter, energy, life, even time itself, 50,000. Years ago, they nearly destroyed the galaxy. The humans of that time made the ultimate sacrifice to stop them. What sacrifice? They gave up their civilization, their technology, their very memories of the stars. The greatest human warriors volunteered to stay behind while the rest of the species was hidden on a small protected world. Those warriors fought a final battle that sealed the Void Devourers away, but the effort scattered humanity's survivors and erased their cosmic heritage. Jiho touched the sword's handle, and more memories flowed into his mind. He saw Earth as it was long ago, with great cities that reached toward the stars. He saw humans working alongside alien species that he now recognized from the Galactic Council. Earth, he whispered. Earth was the protected world. Yes, your people have spent 50,000 years rebuilding, slowly reaching back toward the stars. But the time of hiding is over. The Void Devourers are beginning to wake from their long sleep. As if summoned by Hanul's words, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Commander Choi's voice came over the communication system. All personnel, to emergency stations. We're receiving distress calls from the Kepler 442 system. Initial reports suggest unknown attackers using weapons that dissolve matter at the molecular level. Jiho felt his blood turn cold. The Void Devourers? The first scouts, yes. They have sensed my awakening and know that humanity is ready to reclaim its role as the galaxy's guardians. But this time, you will not fight alone. What do you mean? Hanul's presence in his mind became stronger. I am one of 7 covenant blades, each forged to awaken the warrior spirit that sleeps in every human soul. As I grow stronger, I will call to my brother and sister blades. And as we reunite, the ancient strength of humanity will return. Jiho picked up the sword and felt power flow through his body. His senses became sharper, his reflexes faster. Knowledge of combat techniques he had never learned filled his mind. This is just the beginning, Hanul said. Soon, humans across the galaxy will begin to remember what they truly are. Factory workers will become warriors. Farmers will become strategists. Children will dream of star battles and wake knowing how to pilot ships they have never seen. Why? Me? Jiho asked. Why was I chosen? Because you have the heart of a true guardian. You seek knowledge not for power, but to protect others. You dig through ruins not for treasure, but to preserve the memory of those who came before. These qualities marked you as worthy to carry me. Commander Choi burst into the containment room. Jiho, we need to evacuate. Long-range sensors are detecting something massive moving toward our position from outside the galaxy. Jiho stood, the sword feeling perfectly balanced in his hand. No evacuation. If the Void Devourers are returning, then this is where humanity makes its stand. Humanity? Jiho, we're just archaeologists and researchers. We're not warriors. Jiho smiled, feeling Hanil's ancient confidence flowing through him. You're wrong, Commander. We've always been warriors. We just forgot for a while. He looked out through the laboratory window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, 6 other swords were waiting to be found. Somewhere out there, the greatest enemy the galaxy had ever known was stirring from its long sleep. But for the first time in 50,000 years, humanity was awakening too. And this time, they would be ready. The first attack came without warning. Captain Sunho Park was reviewing supply reports on his patrol ship when the emergency signal reached him. The Kepler 442 system, home to 3 million colonists, had gone completely silent. Sir, we're getting fragmentary transmissions from Kepler 442, reported his communications officer. Most of it is garbled, but we're hearing words like darkness, consuming everything, and they eat light itself. Sunho felt ice form in his stomach. Those words matched the ancient warnings that had been circulating since Dr. Kim's discovery of the sword. Set course for Kepler 442, maximum speed, and send a priority message to Admiral Hyein-jo at Fleet Headquarters. The journey took 18 hours. When they arrived at the Kepler 442 system, Sunho could not believe what he saw through the view screen. Where 3 planets should have been orbiting their star, there was only empty space. Not debris, not dust, just nothing, as if the planets had never existed at all. Scanning for any signs of the colonies, his science officer reported. Sir, I'm not detecting any matter at all where the planets used to be. It's like something erased them completely. How do you erase a planet? Sunho asked. His question was answered when something moved in the empty space. At first it looked like a shadow, but shadows need light to exist. This was something darker than darkness itself. It flowed like liquid, but moved with purpose, reaching out towards Sunho's ship with tendrils of absolute nothingness. All power. To shields! Sunho shouted. Evasive maneuvers! The dark thing touched their ship's outer shield, and immediately the shield generators began failing. Where the darkness made contact, the shield didn't just break, it stopped existing. The metal hull beneath began to dissolve. We can't fight this, his pilot said, fear clear in her voice. Our weapons aren't even scratching it. That was when Sunho felt something change inside him. It started as a warm feeling in his chest, then spread through his whole body. Suddenly he knew things he had never learned. He understood how to fight enemies that consumed matter and energy. Ancient battle tactics filled his mind. Cut all power except life support, he ordered. Shut down everything that generates energy. Sir, that will leave us helpless, his weapons officer protested. Trust me, Sunho said, his hands moving over controls he somehow knew how to operate. The Void Devourers feed on energy. If we give them nothing to eat, they'll lose interest and move on. He was right. After a few tense minutes, the dark entity drifted away from their ship and disappeared into the space between stars. Sunho's crew stared at him in amazement. How did you know that would work? His science officer asked. Sunho didn't have an answer. The knowledge had just appeared in his mind, as if someone had been teaching him while he slept. Similar awakenings were happening across the galaxy. On a mining station in the Vega system, maintenance worker Yoonji Lim was repairing a water recycler when the station's alarms began screaming. Through the small porthole in the maintenance corridor, she saw something that made her blood freeze. A Void Devourer, much smaller than the one that had destroyed Kepler 442, was approaching the station. The creature was only about the size of a small ship, but Yunji could see it dissolving the station's outer hull simply by touching it. "All personnel to emergency pods," came the announcement over the communication system. "Prepare for immediate evacuation." But Yunji didn't run. Instead, she felt the same warm feeling that Sunho had experienced. Knowledge flowed into her mind, knowledge of weapons and tactics, of weak points in creatures that shouldn't have any weaknesses at all. She grabbed a plasma torch from her toolkit and modified it using techniques she somehow knew. The torch became something else, something that could hurt entities made of pure entropy. When the Void Devourer broke through into the station's corridors, Yunji was waiting. The battle lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. Yunji moved with speed and skill she didn't know she possessed, striking at points where the creature's darkness was thinnest. Her modified plasma torch cut through the entity like a knife through smoke. When it was over, the Void Devourer lay still, slowly fading away until nothing remained. Yunji stood in the corridor, breathing hard and wondering what had just happened to her. Back on Harmony 7 station, Admiral Hien Zhou studied the reports coming in from across the galaxy. In the past week, 17 Void Devourer attacks had been reported. But more importantly, in each case, ordinary humans had somehow fought back successfully. "It's happening just like the sword predicted," Dr. Wanho Seo said as he reviewed the data. He was a specialist in studying alien life forms, and he had been trying to understand the Void Devourers since the first attack. Humans are remembering their warrior heritage. "But how is this possible?" Admiral Zhou asked. "These people have no military training. That maintenance worker, Yunji Lim, had never held a weapon in her life before today." Dr. Jiho Kim looked up from where he sat with the sword across his knees. Ever since the attacks began, he had been in constant communication with Hanul, learning more about humanity's forgotten past. The knowledge was always there, he explained, buried deep in human DNA, passed down through 50,000 years. The sword's awakening is like a key that unlocks genetic memories. Genetic memories. Admiral Zhou looked skeptical. "Think about it," Jiho continued. "How do birds know to migrate? How do salmon know to return to their birthplace? Humans carry the same kind of inherited knowledge, but ours is about war and protection and sacrifice." As if to prove his point, reports began coming in of more human awakenings. A farmer on Proxima Centauri B had used his crop harvesting equipment to destroy 3 Void Devourer scouts. A teacher on Europa had organized her students into a defense force that successfully protected their dome city. But the most amazing report came from Dr. Youngmin Che, a scholar studying ancient texts on Titan. He had discovered references to the 6 other Covenant blades in writings that were older than recorded history. "I found them," he announced over the communication link from Titan. "I know where the other swords are hidden." Jiho felt Hanil pulse with excitement in his mind. "Where?" "Scattered across the galaxy, hidden in places of great historical significance. One is buried in the ruins of the first human colony ship. Another lies in the heart of the Crab Nebula, inside what we thought was a natural formation but is actually an artificial structure." "How many Void Devourers are out there?" Admiral Zhou asked Dr. Seo. Dr. Seo's face was grim. "Based on the energy signatures we're detecting, thousands, maybe tens of thousands. And they're all moving toward the galactic center where something much larger is beginning to wake up." "The Void Emperor," Jiho said quietly. "Hanul tells me it's the source of all the others. If it fully awakens, then the galaxy dies," Admiral Zhou finished. "How long do we have?" "Months, maybe a year," Dr. Seo replied. "But the good news is that every day more humans are awakening to their true nature. And if we can gather all 7 Covenant blades, then we might have a chance," Jiho said. He stood up, feeling the weight of the sword in his hand and the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "But we need to move fast. The Void Devourers know we're awakening too, and they won't give us time to prepare." Admiral Joe nodded. "I'm authorizing a galaxy-wide search for the remaining swords, and I'm putting together a fleet of every human ship we can find." "What about our alien allies?" Jai-Ho asked. "They'll help, but this fight belongs to humanity. The Void Devourers are our ancient enemy, and we're the only ones who know how to truly defeat them." Jai-Ho looked out at the stars, feeling the presence of awakening humans across the galaxy. Factory workers were becoming warriors. Children were dreaming of battles among the stars. The human race was remembering what it meant to be the galaxy's guardians. The real war was about to begin. The Vega Nebula had always been considered one of the most beautiful sights in the galaxy. Swirling clouds of gas and dust created patterns that looked like abstract art painted across the darkness of space. But as Jai-Ho's ship approached the coordinates that Dr. Youngmin Che had discovered, he could see something hidden within those clouds. "There," pointed Minji Park, who had insisted on joining the mission to find the Second Covenant blade. "That structure doesn't match any natural formation I've ever seen." What they had thought was a dense cluster of rocks and ice was actually a massive space station, bigger than any city on Earth. It had been disguised to look like part of the nebula, hidden for 50,000 years. "Sanctuary Prime," Jai-Ho whispered, feeling Hanel's recognition in his mind. "The last fortress of the Terran resistance." As their ship approached the station, lights began turning on across its hull. Docking bays opened to welcome them. Somehow, the station knew they were coming. "Life support is active," reported Tae-Ho Lee from the pilot's seat. "Artificial gravity is functioning. It's like someone just turned it on after a very long sleep." They docked and stepped into corridors that had not seen human feet for 50 millennia. The walls were covered with murals showing the history of the ancient human empire. Jai-Ho saw images of Earth as the capital of a galactic civilization, with human ships traveling between the stars. "This way," he said, following Hanul's guidance through the maze of corridors. The sword in his hands glowed brighter with each step, leading them toward the station's heart. They found the stasis chambers in a vast hall at the center of Sanctuary Prime. Hundreds of transparent containers lined the walls, each one holding a human figure in perfect preservation. These were the warriors who had volunteered to sleep until the Void Devourers returned. "They're still alive," Minji said in wonder, checking her scanner. 50,000 years, and they're still alive. At the far end of the hall stood a raised platform with a single stasis chamber that was different from the others. This one was larger, more ornate, and the figure inside wore armor that seemed to be made of the same metal as Jai-Ho's sword. "General Kiwan Bey," Jai-Ho read from the nameplate on the chamber. "Supreme Commander of the Terran Resistance." As Jai-Ho approached, the stasis chamber began to hum with power. Lights flashed across its surface, and slowly the lid opened with a soft hiss of escaping gas. The man inside opened his eyes and sat up as if he had only been sleeping for a few hours instead of 50,000 years. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with scars on his face that spoke of many battles. When he looked at Jai-Ho, his eyes immediately focused on the sword. "A guardian awakens," General Bey said, his voice strong despite his long sleep. "I had hoped this day would never come, but I am glad to see that humanity remembers its duty. General, I'm Dr. Jai-Ho Kim. We need your help. The Void Devourers are returning." General Bey stepped out of the stasis chamber and stretched muscles that had not moved for millennia. "How many of my people have awakened across the galaxy?" "Thousands," Jai-Ho replied. "Maybe tens of thousands. Ordinary humans are remembering how to fight, but we need to find the other Covenant blades." "2 more lie here in Sanctuary Prime," the general said, "but their guardians must prove themselves worthy." He gestured to the other stasis chambers. "Wake my warriors. It is time for them to see if this new generation of humanity is ready for what comes next." Over the next several hours, the ancient warriors began to wake. Each one emerged from stasis with the same calm acceptance, as if they had always known. This day would come. Among them was Soyeon Yu, a scientist who had helped develop the weapons used to seal the Void Devourers, and dozens of soldiers who had fought in the final battle. "The situation is worse than we feared," Soyeon Yu said after reviewing the reports from across the galaxy. "The Void Emperor is awakening faster than we predicted. We have perhaps 6 months before it breaks free completely." "What happens then?" asked Minji. "Then every star in the galaxy goes dark," General Bay replied grimly. "The Void Emperor doesn't just consume matter and energy, it devours the fundamental forces that hold reality together." But there was good news as well. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy of successful searches for the remaining Covenant blades. A young pilot named Do-hyun Im had found one buried in the wreckage of an ancient colony ship. The blade had chosen him as its guardian, and he was already learning to use its power. "Each sword makes the others stronger," Hanul explained to Ji-ho. "As more guardians awaken, the network of guardians becomes active again." "What's the network of guardians?" Ji-ho asked. Soyeon Yu answered. "It's a psychic connection between all human warriors. In the ancient days, it allowed our forces to coordinate across the entire galaxy instantly. A commander on one side of the galaxy could share tactical information with soldiers on the other side faster than light could travel between them." As if summoned by her words, Ji-ho felt his mind expand. Suddenly, he could sense other humans across the galaxy. He felt Captain Sun-ho Park organizing defense fleets near Earth. He sensed Yoonji Lim training groups of civilian volunteers on her mining station. Most clearly, he felt the other guardians who had found Covenant blades. "We are 6, he said aloud. 6 guardians, 6 swords. But we need the 7th. "The 7th is the most important," General Bay said, "and the most dangerous. It lies in the dark space between galaxies, in the prison we built for the Void Emperor. One of us will have to go there to claim it." "I'll go," Ji-ho said immediately. "No," General Bay replied. "You carry the first blade, which makes you the coordinator of all the others. You're needed here to maintain the network." Before they could debate further, alarms began sounding throughout Sanctuary Prime. The ancient warriors rushed to control panels that had not been used in 50,000 years, but still responded to their touch. "Void Devourer fleet approaching," reported one of the warriors. "Large force, much bigger than the scout attacks we've been seeing." Through the station's viewports, they could see dark shapes moving through the nebula. There were dozens of them, each one the size of a battleship, but made of the same reality-consuming darkness that had destroyed Kepler 442. "This is our first real test," General Bay said, donning armor that had waited 50,000 years for this moment. "Can the ancient and modern generations of humanity fight as one?" The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The ancient warriors fought with weapons and tactics perfected in the first war against the Void Devourers. But they were supported by modern humans whose awakening warrior instincts gave them knowledge they had never learned. Ji-ho found himself commanding part of the battle through the network of guardians. He could see through the eyes of pilots in distant ships, coordinate attacks with soldiers he had never met, and share tactical information instantly across light years of space. Young Do-hyun Im flew his fighter through formations of Void Devourers, his newly awakened skills letting him dance between attacks that could erase him from existence. Yoonji Lim led boarding parties onto damaged sections of Sanctuary Prime, using her maintenance skills and warrior instincts to keep the station's defenses operating. The tide of battle turned when the other Guardians arrived. 5 Covenant blades, working together through the network, created a resonance field that the Void Devourers could not penetrate. The dark entities that had seemed unstoppable suddenly found themselves vulnerable to human weapons. When the last Void Devourer fell, cheers echoed through Sanctuary Prime. But the celebration was brief. This was just a probe, General Bay warned. The Void Emperor was testing our strength. Now it knows we're awake and organized. How long before the real attack? Jiho asked. Soyeon Yu was studying readings from deep space sensors. Weeks, maybe days. The Emperor is pulling in void devourers from across the dark space between galaxies. When it moves against us, it will bring an army unlike anything we faced in the First War. Then we need the seventh sword, Jiho said. And we need it now. General Bay nodded. I will lead a team to the Emperor's prison, but I need someone to stay here and coordinate the galaxy's defenses. Take me with you, said a new voice. They turned to see Dr. Youngmin Che entering the command center. He had arrived on Sanctuary Prime just as the battle ended. I've been studying the ancient texts. I think I know how to reach the seventh sword without waking the Emperor prematurely. It's dangerous, General Bay warned. If something goes wrong, you could trigger the Emperor's full awakening. If we don't try, the galaxy dies anyway, Youngmin replied. And according to the texts, the seventh sword can only be claimed by someone who seeks knowledge rather than power. Jiho felt Hanul's agreement in his mind. The plan was risky, but it was their only hope. As General Bay and Youngmin prepared for their mission to the dark space beyond the galaxy, Jiho looked out at the stars and felt the network of guardians growing stronger. Across the galaxy, millions of humans were awakening to their true heritage. The final battle was coming, and humanity would be ready. The Heart of Darkness was not a place that should exist in any sane universe. Located in the space between galaxies, it was a sphere of absolute nothingness, surrounded by the twisted remains of what had once been stars. This was where humanity's ancestors had built their final prison for the Void Emperor, and now it was cracking open. Dr. Youngmin Che stood on the bridge of the ship carrying him and General Kiwan Bay toward this nightmare realm. Through the viewports, he could see reality itself bending and breaking around the Emperor's prison. Space was the wrong color here. Time moved in stuttering jumps. How much further? He asked the pilot, a young woman named Jihan Ryu, who had volunteered for this suicide mission. 2 hours to the prison's outer boundary, Jihan replied, her hands steady on controls that were fighting the warped space around them. But the readings are getting worse. Whatever's in there is almost free. General Bay was studying ancient star charts that showed the prison as it had been built 50,000 years ago. The seventh sword is at the very center, embedded in the final seal. To reach it, we'll have to get past the Emperor's guardians. What guardians? Youngman asked. Pieces of the Emperor that broke off during the original battle. They're not as powerful as the main entity, but they're still dangerous enough to destroy solar systems. As they approached the prison, they could see the damage the awakening Emperor was causing. Void devourers poured out of cracks in reality like insects from a broken nest. Each one was larger and more powerful than the scouts that had attacked. The galaxy's outer systems. They're heading for inhabited systems, Jihan observed. The Emperor is sending them after population centers. General Bay nodded grimly. It's trying to consume as much life force as possible before its final awakening. The more life it devours, the stronger it becomes. Back in the galaxy, the largest space battle in history was already underway. Admiral Hien Zhou commanded a fleet of human ships supported by vessels from every alien species in the Galactic Council. But they were facing odds that should have been impossible to overcome. Status report, Admiral Zhou called from the bridge of her flagship. Void Devourer forces outnumber us 50-1, reported her tactical officer. But human ships are performing beyond all expectations. Our awakened crews are anticipating enemy movements and coordinating attacks through the Guardian network. Was true. Across the battle zone, ordinary humans were performing extraordinary feats. Communications officer Junho Wu was somehow coordinating hundreds of ships simultaneously, his awakened mind processing tactical information faster than any computer. Engineer Ga-Young Shim had modified her ship's weapons to hurt creatures made of living entropy. On distant worlds, awakened humans were organizing defenses that should have been hopeless. On the farming world of Kepler 438b, a teacher named Sabin O had turned her students into a resistance force that was holding off 3 void devourers using nothing but farming equipment and pure determination. But the real key to the battle was Dr. Ji-Ho Kim, standing in the command center of Sanctuary Prime with all 6 Covenant blades arranged around him. Through the network of Guardians, he was connected to every awakened human in the galaxy. Their combined will flowed through him and into the ancient swords, creating a resonance field that stretched across light years. "The Emperor is almost free," reported Soyeon-Yu from her instruments. "The prison seals are failing faster than we calculated." "How are General Bei and Youngmin doing?" Ji-Ho asked. "They've reached the prison's inner chambers," Minji Park replied, "from the communications station. But they're facing heavy resistance. In the heart of darkness, Youngmin and his companions were fighting through corridors that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The Emperor's guardians appeared as shifting shadows that could reach through solid matter to tear at their targets. "There!" General Bei pointed ahead to a chamber where a 7th sword hung suspended in crystallized space-time. The blade pulsed, with the same inner light as the other Covenant blades, but this one was somehow different. More powerful, more dangerous. "The Void Emperor's influence is strongest here," Youngmin said, feeling the weight of ancient evil pressing against his mind. "I can hear it whispering." "Don't listen," General Bei warned. "The moment you start believing its lies, you're lost." They fought their way to the chamber with General Bei holding off the Guardians while Youngmin approached the 7th sword. But as his fingers closed around the hilt, everything changed. The whispers became a roar. The Void Emperor, so close to freedom now, turned its full attention on Youngmin. Visions of despair flooded his mind. He saw the galaxy dying, stars going dark one by one, all life consumed by endless hunger. "Why do you fight?" the Emperor asked in a voice like dying stars. "Life is pain. Existence is suffering. I offer peace. I offer an end to all struggle." For a moment, Youngmin was tempted. The burden of existence did seem heavy. The responsibility of being the galaxy's guardian seemed too much for any species to bear. But then he thought of the children on Kepler 438b, fighting impossible odds because they refused to surrender. He thought of maintenance worker Yunji, Lim, who had faced a creature of pure entropy with nothing but determination and a plasma torch. He thought of all the humans across the galaxy who were discovering that being human meant never giving up, no matter how dark things became. "You're wrong," Youngmin said to the Emperor. "Life isn't about avoiding suffering. It's about choosing to protect others despite the suffering. That's what makes us human." The 7th sword blazed with light, and Youngmin felt the combined will of 50,000 years of human courage flowing through him. The Emperor's prison, weakened by eons of assault, finally shattered completely. But instead of freeing the Void Emperor, something else happened. The sword in Youngmin's hands became a focus for every awakened human in the galaxy. Through the network of Guardians, millions of people added their strength to his. Back on Sanctuary Prime, Ji-Ho felt the 7th sword joining the resonance field. All 7 Covenant blades were finally united again, and their combined power was greater than the sum of their parts. "Now," he said to Soyeon-Yu, "activate the new seal." 50,000 years ago, humanity's ancestors had sealed the Void Emperor using their own life force, sacrificing their civilization to save the galaxy. But this time, humanity had learned a better way. Instead of using their lives to power the seal, they used their hope. Every human who had awakened to their heritage, every person who had chosen to fight despite overwhelming odds, every child who had looked at the stars and dreamed of adventure, all of them became part of a new kind of prison, The Void Emperor, emerging from its broken prison, found itself facing not the small, frightened species it remembered, but billions of humans whose spirits burned with an inner light that entropy could not touch. Impossible. The Emperor raged as chains of pure, human determination wrapped around it. You cannot defeat entropy itself. We're not defeating you, Jiho said through the network, his voice carrying the words of every awakened human. We're containing you. Forever. The new seal was not made of metal or energy. It was made of the human refusal to surrender, the human determination to protect others, the human belief that tomorrow could be better than today. These were forces that the Void Emperor, being pure entropy, could not understand or overcome. As the Emperor was dragged back into its prison, the Void Devourers across the galaxy simply stopped functioning. Without their master's will to drive them, they faded away like nightmares in the morning light. The battle was won, but the war would never truly end. The Void Emperor still existed, held in its prison of human hope and determination. As long as humanity remained true to its guardian nature, the seal would hold. What happens now? Admiral Joe asked, as the fleets began returning to their home. Systems. Now we remember, Jiho replied, feeling the weight of the First Covenant blade in his hands. We remember that being human means being the galaxy's guardians. We teach our children about the stars and the responsibility that comes with reaching for them. On Earth, the sword was placed in a memorial garden where children played and laughed, unknowingly carrying within themselves the spark that would protect the galaxy for generations to come. Among them, young Isol Kim and Hajin Park chased each other through the grass, their laughter bright against the afternoon sky. The inscription on the sword's blade had come true. All enemies of the fallen warrior are now your enemies. But it meant something more than just fighting. It meant that any threat to one human became a threat to all humans. Any suffering anywhere in the galaxy became humanity's responsibility to address. The human race had reclaimed its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as guardians. And in the vast darkness between the galaxies, an imprisoned entity of pure entropy raged against chains forged from the most powerful force in the universe, the human spirit that refused to surrender. The sword had chosen well. Humanity was ready to guard the galaxy once again.